Darling one, you were born from the sweetest love, cast from the fires of creation, burning bright into the making of your perfect constellations. Head high, my love, never let them diminish you. Stand tall in the power of your love. Break open to the thousands come before you, written in your heart with holy blood. Keep going, my love. Hold tight to the scripture of your inheritance, your dreams born from ancient stone. Weave your magic star of wisdom, breathing life into hollow bones. Courage, my love. Place pain upon your sacred altars. Grow seeds where life has become hopeless. Lend hands to those who fall and falter. Let love be life's greatest opus. Welcome, beautiful souls. My name is Tara Brading, and I'm the creator of the Dreaming the Ancestors podcast series, where we talk about remembering and reclaiming ancestral stories, feminine wisdom, and earth magic. This is the 18th episode, and today I'm very excited to welcome Michaela from Rooted Feminine Wellness to the podcast. Michaela is a keeper of traditional women's work, offering and teaching original pelvic and womb care, mentorship, land and body immersions in Ireland. She supports women with everything from regenerative health, sexuality, reproductive health, to the relationship we have to our feminine physiology. She's a whole woman support space offering mentorship for women navigating grief, loss, birth, and life's biggest thresholds. The prayer is a rebirthing of what care gets to look like for women through all stages of their life. I'm so honored to be here with Michaela. Welcome to the podcast, love, and thank you for being here.
Oh, thanks so much, Tara, for having me. I'm so excited for our chat today and to get into all things, women's work.
Yes, very big welcome. And as always, I'd like to begin this podcast by just taking a few minutes to ground into this conversation and into the energy of the ancestors. So I invite us to just take a few moments to close our eyes and imagine that we're all having this conversation in the flesh, heart to heart, and we're sitting on the ground around a great fire. Listeners, I invite you to imagine this with us, to feel yourself around the fire with us. I invite you to imagine that we're sitting in circle together and we're sharing wisdom, we're sharing stories, like our ancestors have done since the very beginning. And as we feel the energy of the fire at the center of this conversation, feeling its warmth, I would like to honor the ancestors. And today I actually feel called not to call in the wise and well ancestors as I usually do, but I would like to honor the women of our lineages who experienced a sense of depravity, who were not nourished, who were not supported, who were depleted, who were unwell, who were in survival mode. I want to honor these women and hold them in our hearts as we have this conversation, and to feel that this conversation will, in some small way, bring some nourishment to these ancestors, to these women who sacrificed so much, who suffered, who were never truly cared for and nourished in their lives for any number of reasons. And so I honor these women, I honor these ancestors. May we offer them our love through this conversation. Shanae. The title of this episode is Healing Intergenerational Legacies of Female Deprivation. And this is a topic that's been really near and dear to me for the past year or so, as I've struggled with burnout and received clear guidance from my ancestors that I need to nourish myself and my female body more deeply and fully. And I know that I'm not alone in this hunger for true nourishment. And I think that so many women feel a sense of burnout at one time or another because, of course, we live in a system that was not made for us and doesn't honor our natural rhythms and cycles. And one of the things that I love about Michaela's work is that she speaks to the intergenerational nature of female deprivation, because this is undoubtedly an ancestral wound that's been handed down to us, a wound that makes us believe that nourishing ourselves is selfish, that we should override our own needs in service to others, and that being exhausted all the time is sort of proof of our worth. It's like a badge of honor, you know? And there are so many stories and beliefs that have been passed down through the lineage about our bodies, which are then reinforced by the dominant culture that we live in. And to live in a way that actually truly nourishes and honors our female bodies is quite revolutionary and heals generations of patriarchal oppression and colonial wounding as well. And to emphasize this point, I really want to read some powerful words from Michaela about the kinds of transformations that happen when a woman is nourished at the deepest level. So Michaela shares, what happens when the body of an Irish woman gets to be fully held, nourished, and cared for? We rewrite the story of starvation and deprivation to one where we are deeply nourished, fed, and sustained. We get to mend the intergenerational fractures from centuries of occupation and displacement. We get to mend the pains we feel from the church. Shame starts to die, and how we relate to our body transforms. We begin to inhabit ourselves fully. Our feelings of belonging to land and life come back online. And although Michaela is specifically speaking about Irish women here, I think that much of this is also deeply relevant to women with Irish ancestry and to women as a whole. So I'm really excited to start this conversation with Michaela. And Michaela, I would love to hear a bit more about you to get us started. Could you tell us about how you ended up doing this work with women? You know, was there an initiatory moment or moments that led you onto this path?
I think one of the biggest moments for me was seeing my own mother deprived of nourishment, of sustenance, and being in a constant, perpetual state of stress that actually made her get sick. Yeah, over 9 years ago, she had a brain injury because of high blood pressure, stress, unresolved imprints from the past. And that led her now to having dementia. And in seeing the and the witnessing of that same thing happening to her own mother as well, it really shook me to my core to look at this bigger story amidst women. And I seen it in my own life, like working constantly in a corporate job and just really busting myself and seeing how I would end up in that same place. Also seeing how in our current states of care or lack thereof in our world for women and for nourishment and for holding, it just doesn't exist. And when I was seeing just through my mother's life of her relationship to body, her relationship to rest just didn't exist. And when she was getting support from doctors and professionals, she wasn't getting anywhere. So I was thinking, I was like, gosh, this can't be everything. There has to be something else that we can do. And, as I journeyed through menarche and started to come more into my womanhood and just seeing how she related to that within me, I was like, okay, we cannot go our whole lives hating this. Through the whole continuum of our womanhood, we can't just be in this hate relationship. So it really led me to seek. And for years, I sought out teachers, and some of them just came to me. I feel like as these things do, things are just popping up, and God is presenting you with what you need. And I met the most beautiful elders and teachers from different traditions and beautiful wise mentors that I traveled to and I learned from. And then I find the original way of tending to women. And I was like, oh, this is it. This is what I wish I could have gave to my mother and my grandmother and all the women before me. So now I've devoted my life to giving that forward to myself, to my future daughters, and to all the women that come to me and work with me. So yeah, seeing the mother and really not wanting that to happen to women in the world going forward to create a new paradigm for women.
Thank you so much for sharing. I really feel the depth of that initiation, and that relationship between mother and daughter holds so much. And it's the place where, like the primary place where we learn what it means to be woman, and we receive all of these wounds from the women before, right? It's like this real crucible where so many of these patterns get passed down. And so it's beautiful that you recognize that, including the experience you had with menarche and, these stories that pass down around your body and your womanhood and all of that. I feel that in your share. And it's beautiful to feel you transforming that through your work and creating this new paradigm. So thank you for the beautiful work you do. And, tending to women's bodies and women's health is something that our Gaelic ancestors, our Irish ancestors, likely would have practiced at some time. But interestingly, it seems like there's very little historical information about this, at least not that I have found. And I've talked to others too who have sort of seen this gap in our wisdom traditions, right? Like we know that there were female healers and wise women in Gaelic Ireland, but it seems like women's care has been virtually erased from our traditions. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Have you found any records or discovered any folk practices that address women's care? And why do you think that so much of this wisdom is missing from our heritage?
Yeah, it's colonialism, the loss, the cultural loss, the loss of our original ways of keeping. And we have lost so much as a people. We've lost culture, we've lost language, we have endured so much historical and ongoing occupation. And we've been so pushed from all of our more folk healing traditions. My grandmother and my grandfather on my maternal side held a cure for the whooping cough, and they had different little things, little folk medicine things that they would offer to babies, and they had some things that they would offer to mothers, and it was like a strand of hair, and it was very folk, but that was, I think, the remnants from their era and their generation of probably so much more. And then of course we have the Banfasa, the wise women, which were unofficial midwives, and herbalists, land tenders. And then we have our keening women, the grief tenders, the holders of grief, of communal grief practice and process that has also been lost. And we have some beautiful women on the land today that are really trying to resurrect that, and around the world trying to resurrect that tradition. But the way that I really feel it and see it when I'm lighting a fire on the land and I'm sitting in those stones and I'm journeying with native plants, I see it as this communal and abundant community of healers and herbalists. But then, of course, around 17th, 18th century, we lost so much of this. This more natural earth-based tending was seen as, primitive, or was seen as, under the Witchcraft Act. So I believe that was in the extermination of a lot of our practice. Then we also have our traditional sweat houses, the Chakalish, the stone lodges, similar to our brothers and sisters and the First Nations people of the Americas. And in Mexico, the sweat lodge tradition, we had that in Ireland. Now, I don't know if we were doing ceremonial stuff. It feels like it was, from what I know, it was more for ailments, but I can totally imagine we were singing some songs in there too. And I think it's really our responsibility as people connected to this land to resurrect what we can feel and what we can piece together from what was lost.
Yes, thank you for presencing, the root cause, of course, like why this wisdom is lost. And, I can really see and track in my psyche and in my soul, like these many different waves of severance The arrival of the church is like one severance. And then the arrival of the English, the Anglo-Normans and the English, is another severance. And then the witch trials, which were so prominent in Britain and also lots of parts of Europe, is another severance. So that even though Ireland wasn't swept up in that so much, the wisdom still started going underground, right? And yet there are these threads, like you said. I love that you talked about these cures that your grandparents held on to, and they embodied that folk healing in that way. And for those of you who don't know, cures are, well, how do we describe cures, Michaela? Actually, I'll hand it back over to you, because it's something that people in Ireland know about, but people in the diaspora don't necessarily know what that is.
Totally. So, when I was growing up, someone would have had something going on, like a sore knee, or a horse would have got lame, or something would have been wrong. And everyone in the community would sort of talk amongst themselves. Does anyone know who has the cure for this? And then everyone would start, chatting to the neighbors and going across the fields and having the conversations. A woman would just come out of nowhere with a little bag of something, and it would always have been the most interesting. I totally understand why this would have been deemed witchcraft back then, because I remember seeing a bit of horsehair, and there was a bag of vinegar, and it was just always these little strange concoctions that I think more were energetic than anything. And yeah, the cure for the whooping cough that I have is one strand of hair in a bag. People in the community would have had different things passed down to them. It's not something I think so spoke of now, especially where I'm from, but growing up, it was ever present and people were always sort of chatting about it. It was sweet and communal.
And the important thing here is that the cures are passed down through some kind of lineage, right? You have to have an actual transmission of how to carry the cure on, right? So, one generation to the next, it's like you have to have that sort of magical transmission of how to do the cure, right? And when I was in Ireland for 2 months in 2018, the woman I stayed with talked about cures. And, she said, oh, when my baby was sick, farmer so-and-so down the road had the cure for that. So I took my baby to him, and the farmer cured my child's illness. And so even though it's less talked about, like you said, it's still part of Irish culture and heritage. And I'd like to think that there were all kinds of cures for women's health, right? And women's bodies. And it seems like those particular kind of folk remedies and things especially went underground because of the intersection between colonialism and patriarchy. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about the work that you do. So drawing from all these threads, when women come to work with you, what kinds of things are they experiencing in their bodies? And when they do this work with you, what do they experience? What do they realize about themselves and their lives as a whole, too, through doing this healing and deep nourishment work with you?
Women come to me for a range of things, from postpartum, from issues with sexuality, for uterine ailments, pains, menstruation, menopause. The whole continuum of womanhood can be tended to in my space, for grief, loss. Someone has passed, I say the whole spectrum. Whatever you need. We tend, and we spend hours tending to the body and or mentoring. But yeah, specifically with my in-person work, women leave and they have the leaf again and the regenerative capacity of the body. And that is one of my biggest things that I say, is that the body is regenerative. We don't question if we cut our knee that it's not going to regenerate. So why aren't we believing in the miraculous power of the female body, especially when it's coming to these ailments such as endometriosis or healing from postpartum and this regenerative ability that we have? So women leave with that, with a lot more trust and belief in the majesty and the magic of the female body. And they also leave with a lot of tools of how to actually tend to themselves and how to mother themselves. Everything that our mothers should have taught us is what I say. So yeah, women always leave and they walk different. Their shoulders are back, their chin is up, their hips are more fluid. They're feeling more of an openness and expansiveness in their life. And it really does change the entire structure of their being. And they're sparkly when they're leaving, so sparkly and renewed fully, maybe for the first time in their lineage and the first time in their life.
Wow, so powerful. I feel the magic of this, even though it's, the most natural thing in the world, right? There's like a magic to it, which feels so relevant to what we were just talking about in regards to the cures and the folk remedies and the communal way that we tended to each other and we healed each other. And I feel like you're embodying that in such a beautiful way. And it feels like the many health challenges that we as women are experiencing in these times are part of a much bigger story, right? The examples you just shared from your practice are a direct reflection of a greater unwellness that's held in our collective and also in our lineages. And so I'd love to talk about the intergenerational nature of female deprivation and women's health challenges. We touched on this topic at the beginning and we've kind of been pulling on some of those threads, but I'd love to go deeper into this with you. So from your perspective, how does the wound of unwellness get passed down through the lineage, especially the matriarchal lineage, the women's lineage, in a psychosomatic way?
We see our mothers, our grandmothers, our elders, the people around us struggle physically, financially, and that becomes what we know. So naturally, we inhabit that within ourselves, consciously or unconsciously. That is something that we are inhabiting. Everything is imprinted within us, even in utero, So if our mother is stressed, like maternal stress can directly impact the nervous system of the child before we even come into the world. If our mother is stressed about finances or she's in physical pain because her mother was, that imprint is within us, even before we're conceived. Then we can see women becoming more vulnerable to anxiety or autoimmune diseases because of this original imprint that they receive from mother, and that mother received from her mother, and that her mother received from her mother, and so on. It's right through our lineage, especially in Ireland, with the famine and the poverty and the deprivation. This is directly impacting the development of the child if there was women in that time, or forced migration. And that is setting up the trajectory for the entire lineage beyond that. Then there's also like our psychosocial inheritance. So the stories, the scarcity stories of like, oh, I couldn't do that when I was young. We didn't have that when I was young, or I couldn't do that. And it's almost like these stories that our parents or our caregivers have that are reinforcing, oh, I can't do that because my parents couldn't do that, or there's no way that I could afford that because they couldn't. And I even see people in my work that they have that resource, but they're still operating from that story because it's the stories that they grew up in their, so first social space, which is their parents or their family unit. And then also the stories of, you must just get on with it. You must just endure the pain and get on with it. If you're sick, oh, just get on with it. And I think that's such an Irish thing, And these are the narratives that shape us as people and filter into every aspect of our lives. And that is where we live from if we don't tend to these imprints.
There's like the nature and nurture aspect to what you're sharing, because of course, there's the nurture aspect, which is all of the spoken and unspoken beliefs and patterns that come down to us in that psychosomatic way. And then there's also the nature of literally genetics being passed down with different kinds of ailments and different health challenges and what have you. So they kind of compound in the body in this really interesting way. And it's so important for us to acknowledge all that's been handed down to us, because until we acknowledge it, until we truly feel it and face it, there's no way for us to heal it, right? And so there's this really incredible moment happening now, I think. And I have spoken with friends in Ireland who are seeing this kind of shift too. And that's apparent in the work you're doing, where it's like our generation is being asked to break the chain and heal some of these intergenerational legacies of pain. And to actually be well, like what does it mean to actually be well? It's always so amazing to me how much is passed down through the lineage. We receive all of the burdens, which we've been talking about, but also all of the blessings too, when we really open our hearts and our minds to that. So there's so much for us to unpack and discover on this journey. And when I do ancestral healing with women, I really break it down into 3 layers. It's like the very top layer is the personal patterns and how all of this is actually expressing itself through our own beings, right? Through our lives in a very personal way. And then underneath that is all the ancestral stories, all the beliefs and the patterns and the traumas. And then below that are the systems of oppression that are at the root of all this unwellness. And we've talked about this a little bit already, but again, I'd love to go deeper. How does colonialism and patriarchy impact women's health and vitality, especially for women with Irish ancestry?
I would love to speak into modern medicine first as a structure that I see that impacts us so deeply as women. There is such a place for it. I value it deeply when there's a need. But in terms of women's health, it has been utterly colonized and it's been sterilized. And specifically in women's practice with chronic issues, you know, maybe you're familiar with James Marion Sims, the father of modern gynecology, created the first women's health hospital in New York in 1855. And in this hospital, it was actually labeled as a women's refuge. And he spent his time there experimenting on First Nations women of the Americas. And that is still the practices that are being used today in our modern hospitals, the forceps and the speculum, amidst many other things. In the Industrial Revolution and the rise of that, when we lost the original tending of women, and then there was the uprise of the modern allopathic care, that is one of the major things that I see in my work that I'm trying to tend to and break down of okay, there's another way that we can view cervix and check her health, and there's another way that we can tend to this outside of invasive practice so our women can feel more nourished. And yeah, just to speak to that as a big separation from our original tending and separation from original women's in-home care, tending ceremonial elders, wise women. And then as Irish ancestry, so many women were forced off their land on boats, forced away from motherland, severance from this original place. And that division and what that does for our health and our vitality is, I meet so many women that are like, I don't know why I feel hollow. And I'm like, it's because you're Irish blood and you're not on that land. And you want to go and feel that. You want to go feel your mother. You literally want to go feel your mother. And, that was colonialism. That was occupation that forced that upon our people. Do you know? So that's such a big, tender point. And our people were literally starved. And what did that do to our women? Pregnant women, children were lost. And we feel that in our bones. Often people are like, why are we speaking about that? That was so long. I'm like, no, we feel that in how we relate to our bodies, how we relate to food, how we relate to resource, how we relate to money every day. That is the core wound for us as Irish people or occupied people in general, globally. And I think another huge thing that I see in women is the voice, our voices. The batascore, the tally stick, was wrapped around our necks. Every time we spoke our mother tongue, a check was put on it at the end of the day. That's how much we would have got beaten. Our voice, our expression, our mother's language was beaten out of us as people. How has that impacted us as women and how we're able to language or speak our truth? All of this oppression and colonialism has impacted our sense of identity, safety, belonging, our experience of being supported and resourced. And these wounds, we see them in how we walk today in relationship to everything.
I'm feeling the depth of what you're sharing so deeply. When you're talking about being removed from mother, as someone from the diaspora, of course, I feel that deep, deep in my bones. And I had chills the whole time you were talking about that severance from mother. And I feel the heaviness of this. It's like this great weight. And it's like, how do we remove all of that burden, all of that weight. Ultimately it's a choice, right? And that feels important to presence. Like, we have a choice to heal this, to release the burden, to make a new choice about how we relate to our bodies, to our voice, to our wombs, to every aspect of who we are. And also, breaking this chain of unwellness isn't that easy, right? It's not just, oh, I'm choosing now to do something different. Like, yes, that choice is so important. We must choose. And somewhere deep in our psyches and souls, there's all of this kind of subconscious and unconscious work that needs to be done alongside of this choice. We might unconsciously, for example, feel a sense of loyalty to our unwellness as a dysfunctional way of honoring the women who've gone before us. It's like what you said earlier. I can't do that because my mother couldn't do that. My grandmother, my ancestors didn't have that choice. So I have to be a martyr, right? And we might unconsciously believe that we're supposed to be martyrs, that we aren't worthy of being vibrant and well. And this unworthiness is something that's also passed down to us. And then, of course, we live in a capitalist society that doesn't honor our need for wellness, which adds another layer of challenge. So, we're pointing to all of the challenges and all of the wounds and the burdens and things. So it's important to see all this, and may we find new pathways. And like you said, create a new paradigm. So my question for you, Michaela, is how can women begin to heal these legacies of unwellness and start to truly nourish themselves?
Notice the legacy, go and understand and see the origins of it. Speak to mother. If mother's still with us, or if family's still with us, or maybe you just know from your experience of mother, of grandmother, of great grandmother, of sister, of auntie, and start to see these women and their experience, how they walk, how they hold, how they deal with life, with resources, with the menopause, with their old age, their aging bodies, food, like noticing all of this and feeling that grief. I feel like when we open the door of this, we do feel so much grief for our women, especially if we are from Ireland. There's so much shame and so much because of the Magdalene trauma. There's so much. It's a massive can of worms. But really notice the legacy, write about it. Try to understand, have conversations with your Irish sisters about similarities with our mothers. And there'll be so many connecting dots, and decide what you want to tend to, and make it your mission to tend to rewriting that story of deprivation by nourishing yourself, by making it your, I know so many of us have like a devotional sadhana or meditation or yoga practice, but I'm like, what if we simplify it just for a second? What core needs were not met around that time of the famine in our lineage, or whatever it is, whatever part of the pattern that it is that you're looking to tend to? For me, it was that, and my relationship with food. I was like, right, I'm going to make it my mission here. I set aside the meditation practice. I binned the breath work. I was like, fuck the yoga for a minute. And I'm going to devote to just feeding myself, to feeding myself, using my resources to pack out the fridge and deeply nourish it doesn't have to be a whole big elaborate process. It just gets to be simple, basic needs that weren't met, that have really, really challenged us. We can repattern through that, through meeting ourselves, meeting our nervous systems with the basics: food, nourishment, hands-on self-tending, honoring ourselves, coming back to rituals and nature, meeting our body's flesh. And like, so many of us in the healing space are so devoted to the meditation practice and the yoga, but then we're not feeding ourselves properly. And I'm like, we may as well not be doing anything. We need to meet these basic and core needs that our ancestors weren't able to meet. And that was the biggest thing in my own life, of being like, right, core needs of Michaela here. And I think that is how we can deeply tend to these threads of unwellness, of just showing, I'm like, no, I'm going to honor my womanhood. I'm going to honor my blood. I'm going to honor my woman. I'm going to meet my breast. I'm going to meet the shame in my womb and my vulva. I'm going to tend to my body in this way, like a lover I would want a lover to. And showing up with that as a devotional practice, I think, is probably the most important thing that we can do as women.
I wholeheartedly agree. And yeah, this has so much been part of my path, and just discovering like which practices, like in terms of nourishment, really enliven me, right? So I have this practice where I get out of the shower and I smother myself in oil. And I have labeled this phase of my life as the oily woman phase of life. And yeah, connecting to that ancestral medicine that was lost, like the smothering of the herbal tonics and oils over the body, and connecting with herbs that nourish us, and all of these kinds of things, that our ancestors practiced but were lost. And so it's like getting to the roots of how we actually need to be well and where the unwellness is. And I think so many people like gloss over the ancestral unwellness we've been talking about because it's so challenging to feel. And I actually really have this sense that women who are called to see all of this and to feel it in their bodies, like we are the ones who are destined to heal this. If you can feel it, it means that you're destined to heal it. And this is our ancestral destiny and part of our legacy and how we rewrite these stories and create a new paradigm, as you beautifully spoke to. I have one more question for you. Could you talk a little bit about the role of the nervous system in women's health and how we can start to rewire the nervous system in ways that support our true embodiment as part of this healing path?
The nervous system is so important for our menstrual health, how we experience menopause, our reproductive health and capacity, and also our sexuality and our ability to experience pleasure is directly linked to the health of our nervous system. Oftentimes, when women are having issues with their cycle, or it's really long, or it's not coming, I look at the nervous system first, and then I'm like, okay, of course, that's exactly why it's not here. And when we tend to the nervous system, it's the spine. It's the connector of everything. It's the web. It's the mycelium. It's the core. And again, in tending to it, it has been way overcomplicated. Oh my goodness. No wonder someone sees the word and is like, nope, that's too much. But our ancestors knew exactly what to do. And they didn't even know it was nervous system healing. And yes, we can get support off practitioners and we can be resourced with help. But truly, after even doing somatic trainings and then realizing, oh gosh, this is way too overcomplicated, our ancestors knew the sound of nature, birds. Now science has caught up and it's like, that's actually proven to lower cortisol. So getting into relationship with the land you're on, going for walks, tuning out and tending and being there without any stimulus, eating seasonally local good food, like actually sustaining yourself. I know people have views on fasting, but I'm like, especially with our cycles, if we're trying to get cycles back and optimizing them, we need to be eating. We need to be eating good, seasonal, local meat if that's what you do. If not, sustain another way. Your honeys, just all of the nutrients. You want to be so juicy and so well watered. So everything that you can get, good water, finding a spring or a source, natural light. This is the reason, one of the main reasons why a lot of us in our nervous systems are so damaged because of consumption of blue and artificial light, Our ancestors didn't do that, like, so we really have a lot to learn. Go sit by a fire, watch the flame, notice how that co-regulates you. That's why everyone feels great after sitting at a sacred fire or a campfire or anything. Eat something before you drink your coffee. All of these small things that can really, really support our nervous system. How can our bodies function? How can we expect to feel settled, balanced, if we're not even nourishing and tending the vessel? And in terms of an actual practice for the nervous system, over the years of caring for women, one of the most vital practices is bringing your hands to your body, tending to your tissue and flesh. That is where everything lives. That is where everything is held. Touching the cervix as the base of the cervical spine, tending to the sacrum, all which you can do with your own hands. Touch is the original medicine. It is the most available to us, and our ancestors knew this too. My nervous system 101.
Yes. And I love the simplicity of it because you're absolutely right. We don't need complicated breathing techniques or, whatever it is, right? All of these different modalities that seek to fix this and is really like, how do I fix this? That's the mentality in those kinds of spaces, I think, can be anyway. So it often is. So, yeah, what you're saying here is just connect with the land, connect with your body, get off the screens, and literally tend to the nature of your own womanly body. This is so beautiful and so important. And dropping into that touch, like touching our loved ones, touching ourselves, touching the earth. Like you said, that touch is the original nervous system medicine. That feels so, so true.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there anything else that you'd like to share, Michaela, to finish our conversation?
It gets to be easier than it's painted to us. There is so much online nowadays, and we're constantly consuming different tips, tricks, and ideas, yet all of us feel like we're getting absolutely nowhere with all of it. What if it just got to be easy? And I also think sometimes the complicatedness of all of this is feeding into the struggle. It's like feeding into our desire, the martyr thing that you spoke of like, struggle, everything's really, really hard. What if it actually just gets to be simple and it's actually there, for us? And yeah, just inviting any women listening to get curious about your lineage and explore what's there. Come to Ireland, feel the land, or go to your origin place and be with the land and feel that relationship to mother, and then bring that back to your own body through your hands.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I would love to just follow on from what you were saying, bringing these threads together of like our feminine wellness and our lineage. And something that I've been thinking about so much recently and exploring and embodying is matriarchal wellness. We've been talking about all this matriarchal unwellness, and we can understand all of the reasons why that is, why that's there. And my invitation here at the end of our conversation is to actually tap into and harness the matriarchal wellness of your lineage, because it is there. It is most definitely there. You might have to go back far, but it is undoubtedly there. And just that phrase, matriarchal wellness, just nourishes me. It unlocks it somewhere deep inside of me, connecting with that phrase, that concept. And I hope that it helps those of you who are listening too. Michaela, this feels like a great moment for you to share a little bit about where people can find you, any projects you're working on, or anything that you'd like people to know about, and any other information about what you offer.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for this conversation. And yeah, for any women listening, I offer whole woman, whole body, whole life care in Ireland with these beautiful devotional multi-day session immersions where you come and be tended and midwifed. And all of that can be found on my website at www.rootedfeminineWellness.com, or just on Instagram at Rooted Feminine Wellness, where you can see my mentorship, The Well. It's a beautiful option for my women who don't feel like traveling and want to do some online tending as well. So there's so much there for you to explore. And yeah, my messages are always warm and open if anyone has any questions. So yeah, thank you.
Mina Buiches Makara, thank you so much for this conversation. It's been such an honor. And I'd love to invite us just to close our eyes for a few moments here and reimagine ourselves around that ancestral fire that we gathered around at the beginning, where we've been gathered together throughout this entire conversation, feeling the warmth of that fire, hearing the cracking of the wood, feeling that nervous system nourishment through being with the fire, being with the land, being with our ancestors, really tapping into that original medicine that you spoke about so beautifully. Inviting a few deep breaths here, letting your nervous system really settle, feeling a sense of matriarchal wellness. And I want to honor all of those women that I honored at the beginning. I want to honor them again those women who were deprived of their basic needs, who were in survival mode for many different reasons. May we honor them and also write a new story for ourselves and our lineage, one in which we get to be deeply nourished and well. Thank you to the women of our ancestry who sacrificed and struggled. And we hope that this conversation and our path of matriarchal wellness gets to nourish those who've gone before as well. Thank you, everyone, so much for listening. I hope that this conversation has moved you and awakened something deep inside of you, helped you to remember these matriarchal ways of wellness and vitality, embodiment. And thank you again, Michaela. You've been listening to Dreaming the Ancestors with Tara Brading. My passion is connecting women to the wisdom of their ancestors, specializing in ancestral feminine wisdom from Ireland and England. If you feel called to connect with your Irish ancestry in an embodied, spiritual, feminine way, I lovingly invite you to sign up for my free reclamation journey, which includes a 90-minute video to connect with your Irish ancestry and ancient heritage. And if you hear the call to connect with your English ancestry, I have a 3-hour introductory workshop called Women of the Wells. You can find these offerings at tara-wild.com/get started. To spell that out, that's TARA-WILD.com/get started.